The yellow cab weaved through the bustling streets of New York City, its weathered exterior a testament to years of service. Inside, Jack Thompson, a 65-year-old taxi driver with salt and pepper hair and kind blue eyes, gripped the steering wheel with calloused hands. This was it, his last day on the job after 40 years of navigating the concrete jungle. As he maneuvered through traffic, Jack's mind wandered to the modest savings account that held his ticket to a peaceful retirement. He'd pinched pennies for decades, dreaming of lazy mornings and fishing trips. A small smile played on his lips as he imagined the quiet life awaiting him in Florida. The radio crackled to life, dispatching him to his final fare. Jack's heart quickened with a mix of excitement and melancholy. One last ride, he thought, steeling himself for the bittersweet moment. Jack pulled up to a sleek high-rise in Manhattan's financial district. A woman in her early 30s rushed out, her designer heels clicking on the pavement. She slid into the back seat, her face partially obscured by oversized sunglasses. "JFK Airport, please," she said, her voice tight with tension. "And step on it." As Jack merged into traffic, he couldn't help but notice the woman's agitated state. She fidgeted with her phone, muttering under her breath. "Everything all right, miss?" Jack asked, concern evident in his voice. The woman's head snapped up as if suddenly remembering she wasn't alone. "I'm fine," she replied curtly before pausing. "Actually, no, I'm not fine. I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life, and I can't seem to stop myself." Jack's eyebrows shot up, intrigued despite himself. "That's quite a statement. Care to elaborate?" The woman sighed, removing her sunglasses to reveal striking green eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "I'm Sarah Collins, and I'm running away from everything I've ever known." Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. "Running away? From what?" Sarah's laugh was hollow. "My job, my family, a relationship that's suffocating me. I've got a one-way ticket to Paris in my purse and no plan beyond that." Something in her voice struck a chord with Jack. He thought of his own life, the dreams he'd put aside, the adventures he'd never taken. "Listen," he said, making a split-second decision. "I know it's not my place, but maybe you need a moment to think this through. How about we take a little detour?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Why not? It's not like I can make things any worse." Jack steered the cab away from the airport route, heading towards the quieter streets of Brooklyn. As they drove, Sarah began to open up, sharing snippets of her life. A high-pressure job in finance, a boyfriend who seemed perfect on paper but left her feeling empty, parents with sky-high expectations. "I just can't breathe anymore," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life." Jack nodded, understanding all too well. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we think we should be doing, we forget to ask ourselves what we want to be doing. As they talked, Jack found himself sharing his own story, the dreams he'd put aside, the regrets that still nagged at him. The cab became a confessional of sorts, two strangers connecting over shared struggles and unfulfilled aspirations. They pulled up to a small park overlooking the East River. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the distance, a reminder of the lives they were contemplating leaving behind. "Why don't we stretch our legs?" Jack suggested. Sarah nodded, following him out of the cab. As they walked along the river, Sarah's phone buzzed incessantly. She glanced at it, her face a mix of emotions. "It's my sister," she explained. "She's freaking out. Apparently my boyfriend called her when he couldn't reach me." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it's worth hearing what she has to say?" Sarah hesitated, then answered the call. Jack gave her some privacy, watching as she paced back and forth, her free hand gesticulating wildly. When Sarah returned, her face was pale but determined. "My sister talked some sense into me," she admitted. "She reminded me of all the reasons I've worked so hard, and she offered to help me make some changes without burning everything to the ground." Jack smiled. Feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment, he pushed the feeling aside. "That's great news, isn't it?" Sarah nodded slowly. "It is, but it's also terrifying. Changing your life is a lot harder when you don't have the excuse of starting over completely." As they walked back to the cab, Jack found himself at a crossroads. He'd set out this morning, ready to close this chapter of his life. But now, listening to Sarah's story, he felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of possibility. You know, Jack began as they settled back into the cab. "I've been thinking. I was planning to retire after today, move down to Florida. But hearing your story, it's made me realize I'm not ready to pack it in just yet." Sarah looked at him curiously. "What are you saying?" Jack took a deep breath. "I'm saying, maybe we could help each other out. I've got 40 years of life experience and a pretty good ear. You've got youth and ambition but need some guidance. What if I stuck around for a while? Offered you rides when you need them? A friendly ear? Maybe some advice?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You'd do that? For a stranger?" Jack shrugged, a smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes, strangers are exactly what we need to see our lives clearly." As they drove back towards Manhattan, a plan began to take shape. Sarah would return to her life, but with a new perspective and an unexpected ally. Jack would postpone his retirement, finding renewed purpose in mentoring this young woman who reminded him so much of himself at her age. "So where to now?" Jack asked as they approached Sarah's apartment building. Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that lit up her entire face. "Home. But this time, I'm going back on my own terms." As Sarah exited the cab, she turned back to Jack. "Thank you," she said softly. "I think you just saved my life." Jack watched her walk away, feeling a sense of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't the retirement he had planned, but somehow it felt right. As Jack pulled away from the curb, his phone pinged with a message from Sarah. "Same time tomorrow? I could use a ride to work, and maybe some more of that wisdom." Jack chuckled, tapping out a quick reply. "You got it, kid. Your chariot awaits." He merged into traffic, the familiar rhythm of the city suddenly feeling fresh and new. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Jack Thompson was looking forward to the journey. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the unexpected turn his last fare had taken. Sometimes he realized the most important journeys are the ones we never plan to take. The next morning, Jack's alarm blared at 6 a.m., a time he'd grown accustomed to over 4 decades of early shifts. For a moment, he lay in bed, disoriented. Wasn't he supposed to be retired? Then the events of yesterday came flooding back, and a smile crept across his face. He got ready with a spring in his step, whistling as he straightened his collar in the mirror. His wife, Ellen, watched him curiously from the doorway. "I thought you were done with all this," she said, gesturing to his uniform. "What happened to Florida?" Jack turned to her, his eyes twinkling. "Florida can wait, hon. I've got one more fare to take care of." Jack pulled up outside Sarah's apartment building at precisely 8:15 a.m. She rushed out, her hair slightly disheveled, clutching a travel mug of coffee. "You're actually here," she said, sliding into the back seat. "I half expected yesterday to be a dream." Jack chuckled. "No dream, kid. Now where to?" As they navigated the morning traffic, Sarah filled Jack in on her plans for the day. She had a crucial presentation to her firm's partners, one that could make or break her career. "I'm terrified," she admitted, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. "What if I choke?" Jack caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Take a deep breath. Remember, you've earned your place at that table. Just speak your truth." Over the next few weeks, Jack and Sarah fell into a routine. He'd pick her up each morning, offering a mix of practical advice and fatherly encouragement. In the evenings, he'd be there, ready to listen as she decompressed from her day. One evening, as they sat in traffic, Sarah vented about a colleague who'd taken credit for her work. "I should just quit," she fumed. "Show them they can't treat me like this." Jack shook his head. "Hold on now. Remember when you wanted to run away to Paris? Sometimes the bravest thing isn't leaving, it's staying and fighting for what you deserve." Sarah fell silent, mulling over his words. As weeks turned into months, Jack found himself opening up more to Sarah. He shared stories of his own career struggles, the times he'd nearly given up, and the small victories that had kept him going. One rainy afternoon, stuck in gridlock, Jack revealed a long-buried dream. "You know, I always wanted to write a book, a collection of stories from my years behind the wheel." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Jack, that's brilliant. Why haven't you done it?" He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Never thought I had it in me, I guess." "Well, I think you do," Sarah said firmly, "and I'm going to help you make it happen." Sarah's determination to help Jack pursue his writing dream reignited a spark in him. He started jotting down notes between fares, recalling colorful characters and memorable rides from his decades on the job. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own challenges at work. Her newfound confidence, bolstered by Jack's mentorship, led her to confront the colleague who'd stolen her ideas. The confrontation didn't go as planned, leaving her feeling defeated. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this after all," she confided in Jack that evening. "Now hold on," Jack said, his voice firm. "Setbacks are part of the journey. The question is, are you going to let them define you, or are you going to learn from them?" As Sarah wrestled with her career challenges, she found unexpected solace in helping Jack with his book project. She introduced him to writing software, helped him organize his stories, and even reached out to a friend in publishing for advice. One evening, as they reviewed his progress, Jack looked at Sarah with a mix of gratitude and awe. "You know, I started this thinking I was going to be your mentor, but look at you, teaching this old dog new tricks." Sarah smiled, a hint of her old confidence returning. "I guess we're both learning from each other." 6 months into their unconventional arrangement, both Jack and Sarah found themselves at crossroads. Jack's book was taking shape, but he struggled with the idea of putting himself out there. Sarah, meanwhile, received an unexpected job offer from a rival firm, one that promised better recognition and opportunities. "I don't know what to do," Sarah confessed during one of their rides. "It's a great opportunity, but I feel like I'd be running away again." Jack nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes moving on isn't running away, it's moving towards something better. The question is, what does your gut tell you? Sarah fell silent, pondering his words as the city lights blurred past the windows. After days of deliberation, Sarah made her decision. She arranged to meet Jack at their favorite diner rather than having him pick her up. "I'm going to take the job," she announced over coffee, "but I'm also going to use what I've learned here to change things from the inside." Jack beamed with pride. "That's my girl. Show 'em what you're made of." As they chatted, Sarah noticed Jack fidgeting with a manila envelope. "What's that?" she asked. Jack took a deep breath. It's my manuscript. I'm thinking of submitting it to a publisher." Sarah's eyes widened. "Jack, that's amazing." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Sarah threw herself into her new role, determined to make a difference. Jack, with Sarah's encouragement, submitted his manuscript to several publishers. They still met regularly, their roles now a blend of mentor and friend to each other. During one of their rides, Jack's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered, putting it on speaker. "Is this Jack Thompson?" A woman's voice came through. "I'm calling from Horizon Publishing. We've read your manuscript, and we'd like to discuss publication options." The cab filled with Sarah's excited squeals and Jack's stunned laughter. As they celebrated, neither of them could quite believe how far they'd come since that fateful day 6 months ago. As autumn leaves began to fall, both Jack and Sarah found themselves on the cusp of major life changes. Jack's book, Cab Confessions, 4 Decades Behind the Wheel, was set for release in just 2 weeks. Sarah, now 6 months into her new job, was preparing to present a revolutionary ethical investment strategy to the board. One crisp morning, Jack picked up Sarah as usual. The air crackled with nervous energy. "Big day?" Jack asked, noticing Sarah's tense posture. She nodded, clutching her portfolio. "If they approve this strategy, it could change the entire industry. But if they don't..." Jack's phone buzzed, interrupting her. His face paled as he read the message. "What is it?" Sarah asked, alarmed. Jack swallowed hard. "The publisher. They want to cancel the book launch. Says there's been a complication." As they navigated through unusually heavy traffic, both Jack and Sarah were lost in their own worlds of worry. Suddenly, a car cut in front of them, forcing Jack to slam on the brakes. Sarah's portfolio flew open, scattering papers everywhere. "No!" Sarah cried, scrambling to gather her documents. Jack pulled over, his own crisis momentarily forgotten as he helped Sarah collect her work. As they sorted through the papers, Jack's eyes widened. "Sarah, these numbers, are they accurate?" Sarah nodded, confused. "Of course. Why?" Jack pointed to a specific section. "Because if I'm reading this right, your strategy could put a lot of powerful people out of business, including the CEO's brother-in-law." Sarah finished, the realization dawning on her. "Oh God, what have I done?" As they resumed their journey, Sarah's phone exploded with messages. Her assistant had overheard board members discussing ways to bury her proposal before the presentation. "They're going to destroy me," Sarah whispered, panic rising in her voice. Jack gripped the wheel tighter. "Not if you get ahead of it. You've got two choices, kid. Play it safe or stand your ground." Sarah looked out the window, torn. "What about you? What's going on with your book?" Jack sighed. "Turns out one of the people I wrote about is threatening to sue, says I'm defaming him." "But everything in your book is true," Sarah protested. "Truth doesn't always win in court," Jack said grimly. They arrived at Sarah's office building with minutes to spare. As Sarah gathered her things, Jack made a decision. "Listen, kid, we've both got battles to fight today. But remember why we started this journey. It wasn't for an easy ride, was it?" Sarah shook her head, a glimmer of determination returning to her eyes. "Good," Jack continued. "Now go in there and show them what integrity looks like." As Sarah stepped out, Jack called after her. "And Sarah, no matter what happens in there, I'm proud of you." Jack spent the next few hours in a frenzy of phone calls, alternating between his publisher and his lawyer. The man threatening to sue was a former city official Jack had caught taking bribes years ago. The incident had never made it to the papers, but Jack had included it in his book. "You've got two options," his lawyer told him. "Remove that chapter or face a lengthy and expensive legal battle." Jack's mind raced. Removing the chapter felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for, but could he risk losing everything he'd worked for? His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "It's done. Meet me at the diner. Urgent." Jack found Sarah at their usual booth, her face unreadable. He slid in across from her, concern etched on his features. "Well?" he asked, bracing for the worst. Sarah looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I did it, Jack. I presented everything, including the part about the CEO's brother-in-law. And you know what? They listened. It was touch and go for a while, but in the end, the board voted to implement the strategy." Jack's face split into a wide grin. "That's my girl. I knew you had it in you." Sarah's smile faltered. "But it's not over. The CEO's furious. He can't fire me outright, but he's going to make my life hell. I might have won the battle, but I'm not sure about the war." Jack reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "The war isn't over until you say it is, kid." As they sat in the diner, Jack filled Sarah in on his own dilemma. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. "Jack," she said finally, "your book, it's not just about stories, is it? It's about truth, about holding people accountable." Jack nodded slowly. "That's exactly what it is." "Then you can't back down," Sarah said firmly. "If you do, everything we've been fighting for, it means nothing." Jack sat back, studying Sarah's determined face. In that moment, he saw not just the young woman he'd mentored, but a reflection of his own younger self. Idealistic, brave, unwilling to compromise on what was right. "You know what?" he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You're absolutely right." The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Jack, with Sarah's support, decided to move forward with the book launch, lawsuit be damned. Sarah, meanwhile, faced increasing pressure at work, with subtle threats and not-so-subtle attempts to undermine her authority. They met every morning in the cab, strategizing and supporting each other. Jack's wife, Ellen, joined their efforts, her legal background proving invaluable as they prepared for the potential lawsuit. The night before the book launch, Jack picked Sarah up from work. She slumped into the back seat, exhausted. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Jack," she admitted. "Maybe I should just quit while I'm ahead." Jack caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Remember what I told you months ago? Sometimes the bravest thing isn't leaving, it's staying and fighting for what you believe in." Sarah straightened up, a familiar fire returning to her eyes. "You're right, we're not backing down now." The day of the book launch arrived, bringing with it a media frenzy. Word had leaked about the potential lawsuit, turning what should have been a small event into a circus. As Jack prepared to take the stage, he saw Sarah slip into the back of the room, giving him a thumbs up. Drawing strength from her presence, he stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "I'm here today not just to launch a book, but to stand up for truth." Just as he was hitting his stride, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. The former city official, red-faced and flanked by lawyers, stormed in. "This ends now, Thompson," he shouted. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." The room fell silent, all eyes on Jack. In that moment, everything hung in the balance: his reputation, his future, the very essence of what he'd fought for all these years. Jack took a deep breath, locked eyes with Sarah, and made his stand. Jack stood at the podium, his gaze steady as he faced the angry former city official. The room crackled with tension, all eyes darting between the two men. "Mr. Hawkins," Jack said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand you're upset about what's in my book, but every word is true, isn't it?" Hawkins sputtered, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. "You can't prove anything. It's all lies." Jack reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a USB drive. "Actually, I can. You see, I may be old school, but I'm not stupid. I've kept evidence of every bribe, every shady deal, for all these years, just in case." The room erupted in murmurs. Hawkins' lawyers huddled around him, speaking in urgent whispers. Sarah, watching from the back, felt a surge of pride. This was the Jack she'd come to know. Principled, brave, unwilling to back down in the face of injustice. Inspired, she pulled out her phone and quickly typed out an email. Meanwhile, Jack continued addressing the crowd. "This book isn't about revenge or sensationalism. It's about holding people accountable, about shining a light on the dark corners of our city. If Mr. Hawkins wants to sue me, so be it, but the truth will come out, one way or another." Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her eyes widening as she read the message. Without hesitation, she made her way to the front of the room. "Jack," she called out, her voice ringing clear. "I have something you need to hear." All eyes turned to Sarah as she stepped up to the podium. She took a deep breath, then addressed the crowd. "My name is Sarah Collins. I work in finance, and I've been implementing an ethical investment strategy that's ruffled some feathers. But more importantly, I'm Jack's friend, and I have news that changes everything." She turned to Jack, her eyes shining. "I just received confirmation. The current city administration has reopened investigations into corruption cases from the past 2 decades. They're offering amnesty to anyone who comes forward voluntarily with information." The room erupted in chaos. Hawkins and his lawyers huddled in frantic discussion. Jack stood stunned, trying to process this sudden turn of events. As the commotion settled, all eyes turned to Hawkins. The man seemed to deflate before their eyes, the fight draining out of him. I need to speak with the authorities," he said quietly, avoiding Jack's gaze. As Hawkins was led away by his lawyers, Jack turned to Sarah, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How did you?" Sarah grinned. "Let's just say I've learned a thing or two about leveraging connections for the greater good. Now, I believe you have a book to launch?" The rest of the event passed in a blur. Jack read excerpts from his book to thunderous applause. Journalists clamored for interviews, fascinated by the unexpected drama and its resolution. As the crowd began to disperse, Jack found Sarah waiting by his cab. "Need a ride, kid?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. They climbed in, the familiar comfort of the taxi a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. "You know," Jack said as they pulled into traffic, "I couldn't have done this without you." Sarah smiled. "We did it together, Jack. That's what friends do." In the weeks that followed, Jack's book became a surprise bestseller. The corruption investigation expanded, leading to several high-profile arrests and a renewed focus on government transparency. Sarah's ethical investment strategy gained national attention, with other firms scrambling to adopt similar models. She was promoted to a senior position, tasked with overhauling the company's entire approach to social responsibility. One crisp autumn morning, Jack picked Sarah up as usual, but this time, he wasn't in his cab. "What's this?" Sarah asked, eyeing the sleek new car. Jack grinned. "Thought it was time for an upgrade. How about we take a little road trip? I hear Florida's nice this time of year." Sarah laughed, sliding into the passenger seat. "Lead the way, old friend." As they drove out of the city, Jack and Sarah reflected on their journey. From that fateful day, when a retiring cabbie picked up a disillusioned passenger, to becoming unlikely friends and allies in each other's battles. "You know," Sarah said, watching the cityscape fade in the rearview mirror, "when I got in your cab that day, I thought I was running away from my problems. I never imagined I'd find the strength to face them head on." Jack nodded, a wistful smile on his face. and I thought I was done with adventures. Turns out, life's got a funny way of surprising you. They fell into a comfortable silence, the open road stretching before them. Both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together, the unlikely duo who'd learned that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we never planned to take. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Jack and Sarah drove on, ready for whatever twist or turn life had in store for them next. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected friendship, personal growth, and standing up for what's right, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share it with others who might find inspiration in Jack and Sarah's journey. Remember, sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from the most unexpected encounters. Who knows? Your next cab ride might just change your life. Thanks for joining us on this ride. Until next time.